Hey guys, it's me Kevin, and today in this YouTube video I'm going to be revealing the earlier rounds of my 2020 AFL fixture request. So for a while I've been doing an AFL project where I made my own version of the 2020 AFL fixture, and now that I've completed it, I've decided to reveal my full project in this video and my next video because for time requirements, I have to split them into two videos. So this video will be JLT Community Series and the first 10 rounds, whilst the next video will be rounds 11 to 23. And I'm hoping to get this video sent to the AFL so they can view it and see what they think about my project. I know they're probably not going to use it, the whole thing. I'm not expecting that, but I think maybe just they could see what I've been up to and what I think of how the AFL fixture should look like maybe in the future. I've got a few other ideas that aren't used in the AFL fixture at the moment, and I'll get to that later in the video. Just to note two things. One, I did make a lot of graphics which show the entire round. I might have made small subtle typos or color code errors because I had to do 27 lots of them, 23 rounds plus 2 round 3 alternatives in the JLT. So I didn't do many at all, probably about less than 10, but I'm just saying if you did see a small subtle error, like in round 20, me doing Sydney as red and blue, for example, that was an accident. Yeah, just probably ignore those because, yeah, I had to do 27 lots of them, so. The other thing to note is the first 3 rounds, plus the JLT, are affected by the AFL Women's. And I did make an AFL Women's fixture request video earlier, I'm not sure when exactly, but if you're the AFL in particular, I'd suggest you watch the other one first, because then you'll see how it affects the JLT plus the first, not so much the JLT, but more so the first 3 rounds of my fixture request. So without further ado, let's get started with this video. So, in the first round of the JLT Community Series, which will overlap with round 5 of the AFL Women's season, it kicks off with Essendon and Richmond at Deakin Stadium on the Thursday, whilst Collingwood play Carlton at Morwell Recreation Reserve on the Friday. Saturday we'll see the Bulldogs and North play at Ballarat, while Sydney play Brisbane in Newcastle. That's a place that I don't think an AFL game's been played there, even a practice match. So I think at least a practice match would be good to play in Newcastle. And in the late Saturday slot, we'll see Adelaide play Fremantle at Richmond Oval, which is in West Adelaide. Whilst in Sunday, Hawthorn play Geelong in Launceston, whilst Melbourne play the Saints at what it should say is TIO Stadium. I don't know why it says Traeger Park. And also, I accidentally said Gold Coast and GWS to play at 4:10. It should be 6:10. But that's played in Townsville at Riverway Stadium. Whilst on Monday, 2:40, West Coast play Port Adelaide at Leederville Oval because it's WA Labour Day that weekend. I went with a more local approach in round 2 of the JLT Community Series, with most of them being crosstown rivals, I guess you could say. And this round runs with round 6 of the AFL Women's. So, Thursday, Carlton play Essendon at Icon Park, whilst on the Friday, Richmond play Collingwood at their training base at Swinburne. On the Saturday afternoon, North and Hawthorn play, I guess you could say, a Tassie rivalry at Blundstone Arena, whilst Brisbane play Gold Coast at Cazaly's in the mid-Saturday slot. And Geelong and Melbourne finish off on Saturday in Geelong. On Sunday, GWS play Sydney at Monica Oval, which is a place where Sydney haven't been since 2011. Whilst Port Adelaide will play Adelaide at Norwood Oval. Fremantle and West Coast will face off at the Wacker. It'll be interesting. It's been the first game in such a long time they'll be played there. And lastly, the Saints play the Bulldogs at Morabin Oval on Labour Day, Victoria, on the Monday. So, now that both JLT matches are finished and the AFL clubs have had a 1-week break, the 2020 AFL season starts off, and Carlton and Richmond, as usual, will kick off the season at the MCG on a Thursday night. Nothing new there. And on Friday, Hawthorn played Collingwood at the MCG. Now, the reason why I chose those two clubs to be on the first Friday night match of the year is because, well, Collingwood, well, they usually always start off their season on the Friday night match, so as usual, put them there. Hawthorn, I had to stepladder them to play a Thursday night match next week, so yeah, that already gives you a spoiler alert for round 2. Hawthorn play on a Thursday night next week. Remember when I said that the AFL Women's Finals would affect the first 3 rounds? Well, this is what I'm on about. I had to leave a little bit of a gap with the Saturday afternoon and I have 2 Saturday twilight matches. Reason being is because in my other video, I said that one of the women's elimination finals will be at Saturday 1:20 and I had to leave a gap so that game could be televised on primetime free-to-air television. Just to clarify, Brisbane and Essendon will be on the Channel 7 Saturday night match. It was initially going to be Giants and Bulldogs, which can be played at Giants Stadium because, well, I don't think it's going to be unavailable until round 2 or 3 because Easter's in round 4. So I think they'd be fine to play at least their first match there. But I was initially going to schedule that match on the Saturday night, but then what happened is I noticed that GWS had a lot more free-to-air matches than Brisbane. So I swapped the 2 around because I felt Brisbane Essendon would also be just as viable of a game to be played on free-to-air because it's Brisbane who played pretty well last year, finished in the top 6. Well, actually finished 2nd before they slumped to 5th in the finals. And Essendon, well, a rich Victorian club, so I guess those 2 clubs will work. It's either that or a GWS Bulldogs rivalry, which was revitalised in the elimination final. Now, another interesting factor is that for the first time since 2014, I scheduled a round 1 match in Tasmania, which I think would be important because a Tassie side is on the horizon. Maybe it's going to join the AFL in a few years' time, so I think it's more important to give them a few more important slots. Don't worry, the bulk of them has stayed on Saturday afternoon, but I thought at least adding a round 1 match to Hobart would be appropriate. And just to clarify, that West Coast Adelaide game is 7:20 Eastern time, so that time of 4:20 local time is correct. So on Thursday 7:20, Essendon versus Hawthorn at Marvel Stadium. Alright, I said Hawthorn playing on the Friday night for a 6-day break, but Essendon 5-day break? How does that work? Well, it's because Hawthorn do a lot more travelling than Essendon do. One of them would have had to give up on a 5-day break, and I thought Essendon, they do a lot less travelling than Hawthorn do, so I thought that's why Essendon get the 5-day break and Hawthorn get the 6. And on Friday 7:50, Richmond versus GWS, the grand final rematch, and it'll be played at the MCG. Fun fact, I actually initially had Richmond and Collingwood in that game because I thought it was going to be a Richmond-Collingwood grand final. I think everyone else probably would have been like me as well, thinking that. So I assumed it was going to be Richmond-Collingwood, put it there, and I had GWS Geelong. No, I had a few other games actually, it wasn't GWS Geelong. And I had to swap a few games around this round, and then demolish a few other rounds, just because GWS ended up making the grand final over Collingwood, and I wanted the grand final rematch early on a Friday night at the G. So it was actually kind of interesting me trying to swap those few games around and swap a few rounds around. Yeah, it was a little bit chaotic. Same deal again, no Saturday afternoon match, so one of the preliminary finals for the AFL Women's can be played on free-to-air primetime Saturday 1:20. Now to clarify, Collingwood and Geelong, of course, will be the game on Channel 7. Imagine Fremantle, Brisbane, jeez. And one other important thing to note in this fixture, one of the changes I did was instead of Sunday 4:40, I did Sunday 4 o'clock. Because the thing is, if you look at the Super Saturday, it's 1:45, 4:35, Saturday 25. That means there's a 2-hour, 50-minute gap between games. I thought, why is there a 3-hour, 30-minute gap between 1:10 and 4:40? And people complain about the 4:40 slot and how it's poor attended and all that. Well, just make the game after the 1:10 slot 2 hours, 50 minutes later and make it a 4 o'clock slot. That's what I would logically do if I was the AFL and I wanted to at least just get a few extra people. I know we've got pretty good attendances. We're the most attended sport in Australia. But I think just at least get a few more attendances and maybe make that slot not as dreadful as it seems, that's why I put 4 o'clock. And also, it doesn't clash with anything. Well, apart from the 3:20, but that's on Fox Sports 3, so it's alright. But it doesn't clash with the 1:10, so that's why I did it at 4 o'clock. So round 3 is where things get pretty complicated, and I had to do a little bit of space so a few altercations can be made. Richmond, Collingwood, and Geelong, Brisbane playing on Thursday and Friday respectively is fine. That won't be affected. As usual, the Saturday afternoon slot is left free, and that's for the AFL Women's Grand Final, to be played at about 1:30, 1 o'clock-ish. I think I said 1:30 was the grand final time. And then 2 Saturday twilight and 2 Saturday night slots from there, and then 3 Sunday. Now, I scheduled games at the MCG and Icon Park. I know what you're thinking. I'll get to that in a minute. And no games at Marvel Stadium until the Sunday. Reason being is if a Victorian team gets the rights to host a women's grand final, they can play that on the Saturday. And pretty much every team except for West Coast, Fremantle, and Gold Coast can host it on the Saturday 1:30 slot. However, there are some complications. The first one being if West Coast or Fremantle win the rights to host it. They can't play a grand final at 10 o'clock in the morning, can they? Because obviously the time difference will be a big effect. So what they have to do instead is Gold Coast and North and Geelong and GWS and Fremantle will be moved forward 3 hours into the Saturday afternoon slot. And that means the 4:30 slot is free so that either the Eagles or the Dockers can play a grand final at Optus Stadium. The game should go on till 6:30 and presentation should finish by 7. Essendon City, I know it says 8:10, but that can be played at Saturday 7:25. Carlton Port Adelaide, which is the Channel 7 game, that is going to be played at 8:10. Reason being is the news will go on from 7 to 8, so the game has to be played after the news. The alternative thing is they play that game at Saturday 25, but have it on 7 May instead. That's the alternative. And the reason why it's being played at Icon Park, I did schedule 4 matches for Carlton at Icon Park. I know the AFL won't do that, but I thought at least do it in my version because, well, hey, it's my version. The other reason, so basically Icon Park is a 25,000 seater stadium, and it's fully seated, so there's no grass hills or anything. So I thought, yeah, it should be at least fine to host a few matches, like 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. Because let's face it, Gold Coast and GWS have grounds that are just as big. And don't worry, I did all the games against low drawing sides anyway, so Carlton fans aren't really missing out on that much. I mean, I don't think many fans would want to go see Carlton Gold Coast anyway. But anyway, the other reason I did schedule a few matches is because of a few clashes with MCG and Marvel Stadium, and it was technically the only way to break out the deadlock. Not so much here, but you'll see this in the later part of the season. There was 2 rounds that were affected by this. I was initially going to schedule 3 matches at Icon Park, but for that reason I had to do 4 instead. You'll see this in the next video. The other complexity is if Gold Coast somehow win the rights to host the Women's Grand Final. Okay, it's unlikely, but anything's possible. In that case, Saturday 1:45, Giants will play the Fremantle to fill up that Saturday afternoon slot. Funny me, swapped the slots, but forgot to swap the grounds around. Yeah, whatever, you know what I'm on about there. But Sunday is where things are mostly affected, where Melbourne and St Kilda is rescheduled to 4 o'clock, because the grand final will be played at about 1:30, game should end by about 3:30, and presentation should be all over by about 4. Allowing both Adelaide and the Bulldogs and Melbourne St Kilda start playing at the 4 o'clock slot. And West Coast play Hawthorn on the Sunday free-to-wear match at 7:20 after the news. And I did it in WA because I don't think many AFL fans would want to attend a Sunday night match, so I thought do it in Perth just to make it a little bit earlier for fans to attend. Round 4, Easter weekend has been completely affected by broadcasting. So I was trying to make Brisbane, Collingwood, North Melbourne, Essendon, Adelaide and St Kilda, which is the standalone Easter Sunday match, by the way. and Hawthorn Geelong, all accessible and available on free-to-air television prime time across the entire nation, while also trying to have a Saturday match. Now the thing is, the AFL doesn't like scheduling more than 5 free-to-air matches in any state, even on the most special weekends. So I had to make it in a way for all 4 of these games to be viewed, plus only one other match. And in WA and New South Wales, considering there's contracts that all West Coast Fremantle in WA and Sydney and GWS matches in Sydney should all be televised, it made it difficult. So the only way I was going to get all 4 of those games to be viewed, plus the local teams in the same weekend, without having to subtract another slot, is for Fremantle and West Coast to play each other and Sydney and GWS to play each other. That's the sole reason. There was no other reason behind it. This is the sole reason I had those derbies on in the Easter weekend. That was it. Now, if you can see, Sydney and GWS play also on free-to-air, but only for Sydney viewers and for Melbourne viewers on the Saturday night. Meanwhile, in WA, it's going to be West Coast and Fremantle at 4:15. Not exactly sure why I put that in that slot, to be honest. But it's going to be 6:15 in the Eastern States, if anyone's watching on Foxtel somehow. And meanwhile, there's going to be 3 matches. The 3 earlier matches are going to be played all in Victoria, all in Melbourne precisely, actually. Because obviously there was one match at the Gabba, another one at Adelaide Oval that was played outside Saturday, and there was 5 matches on Saturday. So that's another game where I had to televise at had to play at Icon Park. The only other option was to play a match at Eureka Stadium, which I didn't really want because, well, I did have Gold Coast. I could have had Gold Coast play the Bulldogs there, but I thought, nah, just Carlton and Gold Coast. Now, Richmond and Port Adelaide is played on Saturday 4:35. But remember how I said that that the Sydney Derby will only be televised in Sydney and Melbourne, not Adelaide, because there's another contract in free-to-air broadcasting where 3 matches in 3 of Port Adelaide and Adelaide's matches need to be delayed on free-to-air television, and 3 of Fremantle and West Coast's matches should be delayed also on free-to-air television in Perth. So basically, Port Adelaide are going to use one of those 3 delays to delay their Richmond-Port Adelaide match, which will be played at, say, 4:35, to be televised on Saturday 7:05 Adelaide time. Unfortunately for Gold Coast, they have to suck it up, and they can only televise the Saturday afternoon slot. Sydney will be affected similarly in Anzac round later on. After the success of last year, I decided to keep Brisbane and Collingwood on a Thursday night and North Melbourne and Essendon on a Friday. I think both teams would suit that slot. And then Hawthorn and Geelong, well, obviously they've been playing at the MCG on a Monday for like the last 10 years, so continue that tradition. Now, the thing with Adelaide St Kilda, I was trying to do it where 16 of the 18 teams, the 2 that were left out were GWS and Gold Coast, unfortunately. Sorry, you two. But the other 16 teams to at least get 1 marquee slot. So I thought that's where St Kilda will get their marquee slot, as well as Adelaide will be also able to host a marquee slot. Don't worry, WA fans, West Coast will get their marquee slot later on, and I'll show you where. It won't be in this video though, it'll be in the next one. That might give you a clue. A Thursday night at Marvel Stadium, the Bulldogs versus Essendon. Bulldogs are the 3rd team to suffer from a 5-day break, the first being Essendon, and the second, I forgot to mention, being Collingwood, which was rounds 2 to 3, if you noticed. Conversely, on Friday night, Port Adelaide, I scheduled Port on a Friday night to avoid a 5-day break going into next week's Thursday night clash against the Dogs. So I had Port and North play. It was limited selection who, because of the breaks on who Port can play, and also because of that Bulldogs-Essendon match, it restricted a few teams. So that's why I had Port and North on the Friday night. Another thing, Geelong unfortunately suffer from a 5-day break playing Carlton on a Saturday night, whilst Hawthorn, given that they travel a lot and given that they have to play in Launceston this weekend against Brisbane, They escaped a 5-day break for the second time in a row, and have a 6-day break and play on the Sunday afternoon against Brisbane at Launceston, which is the first game of the year in that city. Anyway, other thing to note is that Collingwood and Adelaide, that match is being played at 1:45 or 1:15 Central Standard Time. Why that's important to note is that that game on South Australian free-to-air TV will be delayed to 4:15 instead. It will be one of Adelaide's 3 delayed matches. Round 6 is Anzac round, and 4 very important free-to-air matches, plus a 5th, which isn't that important, are televised on free-to-air television in this Anzac round. The round starts off on Thursday with Port playing Bulldogs, get to that in a second. Melbourne play Richmond in the Anzac Eve clash on a Friday night. Doesn't matter that Melbourne had a bad year last year, although it does mean that this is Melbourne's only opportunity to shine on the Friday night stage. Against Richmond, who are suffering a 5-day break, them and Collingwood, I made sure they were the first 2 teams that I wanted to give them a 5-day break. And Richmond's could have been easily avoidable, but I chose to play them and Saints on the Sunday for that reason. Well, because they're the 2 best teams. Well, I'm referring to Collingwood, not Saints, obviously. Richmond and Collingwood, they're the 2 best teams, travel the least and play at the MCG the most. So, obviously, they're the 2 teams you want to see them suffer from 5-day break the biggest. Anyway, so Collingwood and Essendon, of course, the biggest home and away match of the season, is played on a Saturday. Now, that was a little bit hard to schedule matches around that. I had Fremantle Hawthorn on the Saturday night, which was the WA Anzac match, and the South Australian Anzac match, Port Adelaide and Bulldogs, on the Thursday. There was also North and Carlton at Marvel Stadium on free-to-air, but who cares about that? Not just to get a free-to-air match on Sunday. The interesting thing, and I know people will be raising their eyebrows, Kevin, there hasn't been an AFL match in Wellington for 4 years yet, nutchuck. Yeah, I'm completely aware of that. At the same time, I disagree with it. In my opinion, I don't know why the Saints, as well as the Power and Suns, have been persisting with playing games up in China where, let's face it, that only about 10,000 people or less support it and actually attend the matches. In addition, it's a long way away from Australia. It's like an 8-hour flight. St Kilda players were getting viruses there last year, and it's hot and sticky and humid up there. So why try to play there when you've got an easier alternative over at Wellington, which is like trying to travel to Perth? I think even a little bit less, actually. No, maybe slightly more. I don't know. Wellington are involved in most of Australia's sports anyway, like the NRL, soccer, basketball. So they'd be more interested in what Australia's doing than what China would be interested in what Aussie's doing. And let's face it, the AFL matches in Wellington would be better attended. I mean, when they trialled, it was like 20,000 people attending those matches. And in my opinion, given that it's played at Anzac Day, and the other 3 were also played at Anzac Day, that match has added significance. That said, I don't think it should be played on free-to-air television. The way the free-to-air television will work is that in both Victoria, South Australia, WA, and every other place that doesn't have a specific free-to-air requirement, it will be Collingwood and Essendon on the Saturday 3:20, and then Fremantle and Hawthorn later in the night. Sydney will miss out on a Saturday night match, having the St Kilda Sydney match early, which is 12:20 or 2:20 over in New Zealand. And then after that, it will be Collingwood Essendon at 3:20. Meanwhile, up at Queensland, the same, Collingwood Essendon. But then it's Geelong and Gold Coast later in the night. On a separate note, the GWS Adelaide match on Sunday afternoon will also be delayed on South Australian television to 3:40. So round 7, after 6 hectic rounds, it finally quietens down at round 7. And it's the first round of the season where it uses the standard fixture rather than having one-off slots. So this is basically how the standard fixture looks like in my version. Now, notice I did 2 changes here. instead of it being Saturday 7:25, Saturday 7:40, or Saturday 8:10, and it changes every now and then depending on who's the home team and where it's played, I kept the consistency in my version and did it all at 7:40, okay? Irregardless of whether it's played in WA, South Australia, or any other state, okay? So that means WA matches will now have to put up with Saturday 5:40 night matches. The other changes I said earlier, Sunday 4:40 is turned into Sunday 4 o'clock, which means the match can end at 6:40. I think that's more preferable for fans. So in round 7, just the more generic fixtures. Western Bulldogs and Geelong on a Friday night match. I think those will be two teams that will be playing very well next year, probably in the top 4 or top 6 or whatever. And I think that will be a good match to play at Marvel Stadium. Saturday twilight, we'll see Port Adelaide and Adelaide play the first of the 2 Adelaide showdowns. Whilst on Saturday 7:25, Brisbane played Gold Coast at the Gabba in what was Gold Coast's first free-to-wear match in over a year and their only free-to-wear match of the season. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Why are you televising Brisbane and Gold Coast and Sydney and GWS on Channel 7 and then West Coast and Freo and Adelaide and Port Adelaide on Foxtel? Those 2 matches are more important. Just wait. Wait till I finish the full fixture, will you? And then start complaining if you have any queries then. Just wait and see with those 2. I mean, it could be televised anytime, you know. Anyway, enough about that. Carlton Collingwood, Sunday afternoon. Saints Hawthorn, yeah. So, on Friday night, Geelong will play one of its 2 matches at the MCG against Essendon in what should be a high rating and high attended Friday night match. In terms of the rest of the fixture, I try to fixture it in a way that most of the matches in Victoria are being played in the Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, and early Sunday slots. Whilst the games in Sydney and Queensland are being played in twilight matches, in the twilight slots, and in the Saturday night match. Whilst for Adelaide and WA, matches being played at the Saturday night slots and a few matches in the afternoon slots. Not so much for WA, but in South Australia, and a few twilight slots for South Australia. Also with the 2 o'clock slot with Fremantle versus Richmond. As you can see, it's played 2 o'clock Western Standard Time. What I did was all games should be played at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, regardless of which state it's played, which can explain why Fremantle are playing a home match at 2 o'clock as opposed to 3:20 and 2:40 as us WA fans have been used to as of recent. So, on Friday night, the grand final rematch. I wished. Last year's grand final rematch. I don't know. But the 2 grand finals from 2018 are playing on Friday night because those are 2 teams that have got some sort of rivalry because of the matches they faced off in 2018. And even 2019 when Collingwood beat West Coast by 1 point. So I think it'll be appropriate to put that on a Friday night match. It'll also be West Coast's first Friday night match at Optus Stadium. And how OCD I am, I make the most subtle of changes where I made a Friday night match in WA 10 minutes later than it used to be to 6:20 just to make it a straight half an hour from the usual 7:50. So, yeah, a little bit quirky there, but I don't know. Does it really matter if it ends at 11 instead of 10:50? Other games to note are that Richmond and Gold Coast, that's being played at Marvel Stadium. Reason is, I don't want Richmond to play 16 matches at the MCG like they did last year. And I want them to at least play at some other grounds instead of playing their final 7 matches at the G. Because that was just a disaster last year. The other thing is Gold Coast, I don't want them to play more than 1 match at the G. They already play Collingwood in round 11, I think it is. So I had to schedule that at Marvel Stadium. In fact, there is no game at the MCG, funny enough, this week, because Melbourne are playing Freo at TIO Stadium, whilst the Dogs, they don't play at the G, but they're playing Sydney at Eureka Stadium. in Ballarat. So that'll be one of the 2 matches being played in Ballarat there. And Hawthorn also play Adelaide at UTAS Stadium in Launceston. Round 10 is Sir Doug Nicholls round, where we acknowledge the Indigenous culture of Australia. And Sydney, as usual, will be playing on the Friday night of that round, but I think they should permanently play Hawthorn rather than playing teams like Carlton. Alright, Collingwood's understandable, but I think they played way too many marquee matches already as it is. So I think Sydney Hawthorn, considering they're fierce rivals, I think that would be a fair choice, considering they also play a lot of Friday night matches between each other anyway. And on Saturday night, as usual, it's Essendon and Richmond at the MCG for the Dreamtime match. And on Sunday, now, I know what you're thinking, why play 2 matches in a row in Darwin? That wasn't supposed to happen. And if I was working in the AFL fixture department, I wouldn't allow that to happen. The only thing is, I was in a little bit of a rush because I was trying to get this video out as soon as possible. Otherwise, I probably would have been a bit longer and I would have had to make a few more changes, which I wasn't prepared to do for the sake of a video. And so basically, and it was impossible for me to schedule a match at TAO Stadium else in any other round later in the season, so that's why I had to do it last week. That match was going to be there regardless. So yeah, that's what that's all about. Apart from that, Fremantle finish off Sir Doug Nicholls round as usual. It's a Sunday twilight match at Optus Stadium. Well, not twilight, afternoon, because it's 2 o'clock now. Additionally, North Melbourne and West Coast are going to be playing at Blundstone Arena, and for WA viewers, they will view that on delay. Instead of 11:45, it will be 2:45 instead. So that is Sir Doug Nicholls round for you. And that's it for the 2020 AFL season. Next, it's finals. No, I'm just kidding. Just imagine. That would actually be so bad. We already had that problem with the AFL women's. Anyway, where's the rest of the fixtures? It's already done. It's just because of time requirements. I need to stop this video now. And I'll be uploading a second video in like 2 or 3 days' time. That will show the other rounds 11 to 23. So I'll do that in 3 days' time. So stay tuned for that. And I hope you like this video. Please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Check out my other videos. And share this video with other people and make this channel grow. And as always, I'll see you in a few days' time with the second half of this video. Goodbye.